Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 262nd Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss tariffs between international trading partners, why we have them, who pays them, and how are they paid. We discussed that just a moment ago. Get to it. Leading off today is Susan Hanlon, member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired Dean of the College of Business at the University of Akron. Then Patty Haskins, former member of the Wadsworth City Council and retired math teacher at Wadsworth Senior High School. Then Mike Reese, member of the team at Howard Hanna Real Estate and member of the Wadsworth Board of Directors of the Wadsworth Chamber of Commerce. And finally, Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Brian's not, oh, there he is. Hi. Good morning, Bryan.
Morning.
And Bryan is also the first gentleman of Wadsworth.
Oh, boy.
Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Susan, tariffs have been used between countries for many years for many reasons. What do you think of the tariff wars that are now going on between the U.S. and many of its trading partners?
Well, I think we are, as of yesterday, excuse me, entered into a new era in modern times. We have never had so much attention and action with tariffs. And, I think only time will tell, because one thing I think everyone would have to agree on is there's no agreement about whether tariffs are good or bad. You can find economists from every line of thinking in economics, and some of them think they're good, some of them think they're bad. I can actually see both sides. So at one time, and this was not the first time that a Republican president has been pro tariffs. William McKinley was a good example. He actually beat his opponent, Grover Cleveland, in a presidential election when tariffs were the main topic. And his notion, and the thing about why are tariffs good, and you can't help but say, okay, that makes sense. Tariffs, they protect domestic suppliers, domestic manufacturers. And if we have a lot of domestic manufacturing, then you have a lot of domestic jobs, then you have, full employment, and then you have a middle class. Okay. Now, and who knows Trump's real reasons for doing this? I personally think he's just trying to raise revenue, because all it is a tax. It's a consumption tax. And in my mind, that actually is more fair than the graduated income tax that we have right now. But he wants to reduce taxes, and he has to pay for it some way. And this is estimated. What he did yesterday is that it might make up for a third of what he wants to cut taxes in. But the problem with his thinking, I think, is we don't have the labor force. Even if we've gone so far with globalization, it would take a long time to get everything reshored. And even if we did, we don't have the labor force to service all these manufacturing jobs. Now, having said that, I agree that we need to somehow pump up our domestic manufacturing, because if our economy, if all we have is service, nothing against you, Bryan, I love service businesses, but and Mike, but if all we have is services, we're a hollow economy. We need manufacturing jobs. This is clearly a way to bring them back. I don't know, how long it'll take. I don't know how successful it will be. And in my very classic class, I was trained in classical economics. My knee-jerk reaction is say tariffs are bad because it's a protectionist point of view, and it shuts down comparative advantage. So I'll stop that so everybody has a chance to talk and we can discuss.
Okay, Patty, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm the one person on the panel that is not in business and it doesn't deal with this, but I am of the opinion that tariffs may not be all that the administration is making them out to be. You know, Susan said there are some definite problems with them. I know that the idea is that if we do the tariffs, this will force companies to come into the United States, build their companies here, provide jobs for Americans. Well, I heard on a recent telecast that many of those manufacturing jobs are never going to come back because those jobs are now automated. And so they're not going to provide jobs. I saw members of the United Auto Workers at the Rose Garden ceremony yesterday when the tariffs were announced. And they're thrilled because they feel this is going to bring back more jobs for the auto workers. You know, the problem is when tariffs have been placed before, the auto companies didn't go to a state where the UAW was prominent. They went to right to work states. And yes, they produced jobs, but they were not the high paying jobs that the UAW was hoping for. So, you know, this is what is happening. I'm concerned about the cost that this is going to, that extreme tariffs and a trade war are going to impose upon those members of our country or the people in our country that can least afford it. The people on the bottom of the pay scale are the ones that are going to get hurt the most. If your prices are going to increase on your, and they're already high on groceries and everything that you use in your home, if they're already increased and now you're going to increase them further, it can bring about inflation. I just heard this morning that the average family is expected to incur at least $3,200 more in expenses per year due to these tariffs. You have to look at your 401k, which may, at least in the short term, is going to take a huge hit. I know the Dow futures last night went down over 1,000 points. What time does the market open, guys? Does anyone know what time the market opens? Is it 9 or?
I believe
No
it's
one knows.
9:30.
Yeah, I think it's 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Yeah. So I haven't heard what yet because we're just starting now. I haven't heard what's happened to the market, but this is going to be a huge concern. And how long can this last? We're also, and you know, the thing is, I don't think this is going to be quick. I mean, I've heard from the administration that that this trade war will cause some pain in the short time. Well, I'm not sure what short time is. Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 5 years? Is it a decade before we see the change in this? Because things aren't going to change immediately producing things here in the United States. If we look at the tariffs that were placed on automobiles, you know, presently cars that are technically made here, may cross the border between the United States and Canada or the United States and Mexico 6 to 7 times before that particular car is built. And the reason is because so many of the parts used in the production of automobiles are now specialized. You have a company in China that produces a screw. You have a company in the United States that makes a bolt. You have another company that in Mexico that makes the axle. And then these are all brought back and forth. With all of the tariffs that are going in between Canada and the United States and Mexico, this is going to be an extreme cost. They're saying that most cars now will cost, unless you get one that's already built, could raise the cost of a car at least $10,000. You know, people are having trouble affording cars right now. Are they going to be able to afford them after these increases? I think that the relative or the prevailing thought has been for many years that trade wars are not good for the country. especially in particular times, going back to the Smoot-Hawley Act, which some feel like it started the Depression, but of course it didn't because it wasn't until 1930, but that it did extend the Depression, and that, maybe this is not something we should be looking at. Trump's argument is that we're not being treated fairly. Well, we're tariffing Ireland 200% on Irish butter. That's so that we can protect our dairy farmers here in the United States. So, we haven't always been fair. So, those are just some of my thoughts.
My son and his wife love buying Irish butter, and I looked at it at the Acme, and I can't afford it already. Anyway, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I guess it's in my opinion, important to know how we got here in the first place. So, tariffs are nothing new. They've been used since ancient times, generally as a way to protect domestic industry and also to raise revenue. Countries have been doing it for as long as recorded history. Our country, on the other hand, has been doing it since 1789 under the Tariff Act under George Washington. Our country used tariffs as the main source of income all the way up until the Civil War. So during the Civil War, tariffs were largely replaced by bonds, things like bonds where they were raising money for the military and treasury notes. After the Civil War, we went back to using tariffs for a while for raising money up until the 16th Amendment was passed in 1913, which then tariffs were largely replaced by income tax. So they had their place in raising money for a country. And I think that's the current administration's idea. They're claiming that they'll be able to raise $6 trillion over 10 years, which sounds good on paper. But I think the problem is they've never really been used in the way that they're used today. The president has slowly gained power over Congress, and Congress actually gave it to them. Originally, the Constitution gave Congress the power to levy taxes, and then through a couple of Supreme Court cases, the president was slowly given some power to move tariffs one way or the other, a certain number of percentage points. I think that the best thing we have about raising tariffs really high is the Smoot-Hawley Act. That was Smoot-Hawley Act in 1930. So the Great Depression was already going at that point. But so they wanted to try to use tariffs to work their way out of the Great Depression. The problem is it had the opposite effect, and it ended up leading to a 40% decrease in U.S. exports for several years after it was passed. So it didn't help. It actually made it a lot worse. Now, whether these current tariffs are going to work, we can look in 2018. This is when it was when USMCA agreement was passed between Canada and Mexico, and that was done under the Trump administration. It replaced NAFTA, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. And a lot of people are calling it NAFTA 2.0 because it really didn't change a lot. It just kind of updated it. And but what they had found is that Duke University did a study under Professor Felix Tintelnot. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name, but he was through the Department of Economics.
Excuse me, at what university?
Duke University did a study. So they looked at appliances, refrigerators, washers, and dryers. Now this is under the new tariff acts, and they found that there was a 10% price increase on these appliances coming into the country, and they also concluded that it was a full pass-through to the consumer. The consumers were paying the entire amount of increase, and they also suggested through their studies that if they pass a 20% increase, which is I think more than that now, across the board, it will have a very large effect on inflation for consumers. And I think that's a problem that we would all agree with. What it really hurts, it hurts, the foreign manufacturers, of course, but it also hurts consumers. they're essentially a tax on people when it comes down to it. I mean, you're taxing people because the people that are paying the price for these tariffs are the consumers. They're when something costs more to import into the country, those businesses aren't going to
absorb that.
No, they're going to pass it on to you. And it may eventually work out where American manufacturing catches up and those prices come down, but it's going to take a while. It's not going to be something that happens overnight. And what I think the real concern is immediately is that it's going to lead to a recession. And that's a real concern, especially for everyday people. If you're a billionaire, that's not going to hurt you. I mean, you'll weather it.
Yeah.
But somebody that's living on a fixed income, or somebody who's, the markets are down, who's hurting their retirement, that's a real problem. So I think that, like it was said, only time can really tell. But it seems that, what these really high, this has never been done before. Usually tariffs in modern times have been used to help regulate the economy a little bit. But now what these across the board tariffs, I mean, this is uncharted territory. So it's something that we should all be worried about.
As a Republican, I'm quite concerned about that. Bryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, these are a lot of good points. And I think what comes to mind is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. These are reciprocal in nature. So these countries that have had unbelievable tariffs and VAT taxes on our goods coming into their country have been sitting back. They never thought they were that terrible, because they've been using them for years and years. Now, it is unprecedented that the United States is now basically saying, we're going to play your game. And I believe this is a part of the Trump negotiating in public with these countries that have just been pillaging us. I would agree. I watched the thing, and I would agree with most of what he said. Now, he likes to riff on a lot of different things. But the fact is, we've had close to $1 trillion trade imbalance with countries, China, $295 billion a year in a trade imbalance. Japan, you can't import rice to Japan. 700% tariff. Canada has tariffs and VATs. So when they talk about, well, wait a second, their tariff in the EU is only 5%. Why is Trump taxing us 25% on a tariff? Well, they add 19% in a VAT. And that VAT is almost like, it gets added and added. You think tariffs are bad being added across borders?
Is that a value-added tax?
Value-added taxes, yes.
Okay.
Canada has had value-added taxes, and the EU has had value-added taxes for a long time, and nobody's been screaming about those. Nobody's been saying, hey, wait a second, guys. You mean, a tax is a tax if you call it a VAT or a tariff or an income tax. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And they've had these things in place for years, and we've never done anything about it. I look at this as a leveling up, and in Trump's own Neanderthal way, which I don't really agree with, he's basically putting these countries on notice. The premier of Ontario has said, hey, wait a second, guys. What if we agree to have 0 tariffs on your stuff? Will you go to 0 on ours? I think that's a good place to start. Yeah. If we're going to basically export, and this goes back to the days of Ross Perot when he talked about NAFTA. He said there'd be a giant sucking sound, and that's what's happened. Globalization has not been our friend. And all you have to do is drive an hour to our east and go through Youngstown. Go half hour up to Cleveland and see what manufacturing and the lack of manufacturing has done to our country. And we found ourselves in this precarious position that we can't import enough steel to build a daggone battleship. Can you believe that? Yeah. If we got into a hot war with China, we don't have enough steel to build a battleship. That's scary. That to me is a national security issue. When a country bears so much sway over these particular types of fundamental goods, steel, aluminum, other things that we use in manufacturing, they can shut that pipeline off in a minute. And we're sucking wind. That's, we got to start somewhere, and we have to bring back some of these plants and manufacturing. I agree, there's a lot of automation in it, but the American worker is resourceful. I guess I'm sounding more like my friends on the other side of the aisle when it comes to, protecting our workers, because these other countries have done it for years, my son-in-law just took another job with a company, Volkswagen, who's building a plant in South Carolina. They purchased these, if you remember the International Scout, remember that SUV way back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're building an EV down in South Carolina. They're building a big plant down there. And they read the tea leaves. They said, where are we going to put this plant at? We're going to put it in the United States. They're not going to have to worry about a 25% tax or a VAT tax or anything like that. So companies aren't stupid. They're going to start shifting production to facilities over here, just like they shifted production from here over to there. Those plants, maybe they decided that, well, we're going to shutter it. We're going to put it more or less on the sideline. They'll bring that stuff back. But the fact is, we have to start somewhere. These are not new. These are reciprocal. And these countries that have basically been, I mean, you just look at that list of the countries of the tariffs that they put on our goods. I've learned more about tariffs in the last probably week and a half than I did at 3 years at the University of Akron getting a finance degree. We never talked about, tariffs was one of those one day, there's a chapter in the book, tariffs bad, trade good, yada, yada, let's move on, and here we've been sitting basically being pillaged. I would put it to everybody here. How would you feel if you sold something to somebody and they tariffed and vatted the crap out of that thing? And all of a sudden we bring it in at 2.4, 5%, try to import eggs and milk and cheese into Canada. It ain't happening. So I guess that's where I get a little bit ruffled when all of a sudden we're worried about, us putting tariffs on other countries, where these other countries, they don't care. You can't get a car into Germany without a 25% to a 50% tariff VAT.
Yeah.
So what do? Ford built a plant over there.
I know. Okay. Bryan, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. The one thing that, though, is whose economy in the end is the strongest, wealthiest economy in the world?
That's us.
Okay. That's us. All right. And yeah, you go to Germany, you don't see, any American cars or anything. Great. But they also have, they don't have as much wealth, and they have issues with, they can't, with this whole thing of, the government providing everything. So, I mean, just at the very core. And then the other thing I would say, I mean, you heard me, I was sounding like, well, yeah, tariffs.
Yeah.
Tariffs will bring back some manufacturing, but in the long term, which we don't ever think in the long term when it comes to the federal government, which is our problem. If we are strictly a domestic economy, we can't grow. I mean, there's a finite amount of growth possible.
Oh, we have to export?
Yes. I mean, that's why it started to begin with, is for growth. Yeah. And we're just going to limit our growth, and I'm afraid everything will fall in on
this stage
itself.
of the game. What are we? I mean, services. I mean, think of the things that we should really be doing as a country. Not only just for national security.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah.
Germany protects that German worker. That German worker that's making the Mercedes and the BMW, I drive them. I want to disclose my conflict here. I love that German car. They do a great job. But, we have to be able to look at the other side of the equation. And Germany has to say, hey, wait a second here. Maybe it's not right that we tax that Cadillac. I've never seen a Cadillac and I've been to Germany multiple times. Yeah. I've seen Ford
the only
vans,
cars you see
vans.
when you're abroad are Fords. I swear that's the only, quote, American.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
I've got
let's level. Can we level up? Is that okay to do? Or do we have to sit back and say, well, we're the wealthiest, we're the biggest guy on the block. So go ahead. Just, tax and tariff and VAT our products. Yeah. I mean, I just think we need to start somewhere, and maybe this is what it takes to wake up our trading partners to say, listen, they're serious.
It's going to be interesting.
Pardon me, but your host wants to get a question in.
Sorry.
Sorry. No, we started off by talking about, who pays the tariff and to whom. I'm very, very confused about how a government benefits by, benefits by a tariff. I mean, it's not paid to the government, according to Susan. But I read where the tariff is actually paid to the federal government through the Customs Service. And then the importing country pays the tariff. I'm a little bit confused about where the money comes from and where it goes.
Well,
My
just
understanding
look at Canada
is
as a great example. Canada.
Yeah.
A product gets shipped over to Canada, they tariff it, and if it's part of their thing, they put a VAT on it, a value added tax. So that part that Patty was talking about that was built here gets sent over to Canada, and maybe it skirts the tariff, but it doesn't the VAT. Okay. I looked into this because I thought, well, maybe the North American Free Trade, the NAFTA and all that stuff that was replaced and everything, does the VAT still apply to it? And it's like, yeah. So that part gets sent over, maybe avoids the tariff, but all of a sudden they throw a 15 or 18% value added tax. It gets put in the car, and then they get to double down on it.
Who gets the tax?
The government, the company pays they recognize that on their return. They send that to the government, and then Canada gets to use that money for social programs, yada, 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 yada. Okay. So, it's, I would say, let's go to 0-0. What's wrong with that?
Well,
let's put our workers to the competitive test.
I still don't understand how the receiving government benefits by a tariff.
I don't think they do. And I one of the groups that is really going to get hurt the most are American farmers, because they are producing food, hopefully with being able to export it. During a trade war, their exporting is going to stop, and they're not going to be able to sell what they have. It's really going to hurt them. The only people I see making out in this are the wealthy, and the wealthy will make out because this is going to be used to reduce the Trump tax cuts, and
nobody was worried about but the point is, nobody was worried about the farmer that had corn and wheat that wanted to export it to any one of those countries, and there was a 300% tariff put on that corn. Nobody was screaming over here about, the farmer. Now all of a sudden, we're going apoplectic on this.
Well, I've just been warned that we're out of time. I want to thank you for a very good discussion.
This was spirited.
Maybe it's see you all in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.